I think I'll even go out on a limb and say that I think every damn body in this room is running a little bit scared.
I'm tired of losing my friends and my friends getting hurt. I don't know about you guys.
A video that I made a few weeks ago, we discussed NASCAR crashes that are virtually lost in time. A series where we talked about crashes that have little to no video evidence of them taking place. Our final story talked about the tragic incident that happened to Stuart Linden, an Australian driver who lost his life after hitting the inside wall at Atlanta Motor Speedway that was packed with dirt, leading to no give against the car. The wreck was horrendous, and one that I'm glad we don't have a clear video of the crash itself due to the description. However, while talking about this video, I touched on a similar incident that happened just 18 years prior to the making of this video. The 2006 Meyer 300, presented by Oreo at Kentucky Speedway, could only be described as an unique race in NASCAR history, with random issues involving some of the top contenders, an upset by a team that only existed a few months prior, and even this incident during the race.
We have some sort of an alarm going off. Nothing to be alarmed about.
But one incident that stuck out to many was the one that happened on lap number 29. In the early stage of the race, Jason Leffler got loose around the exit of turn 2 and spun out in the middle of the backstretch. A dangerous position to be at for the driver, as everyone had to take evasive action. Jeff Vogler, a longtime veteran of the then NASCAR Busch Series, was running in his second race of the 2006 season with Frank Cece Racing. While Leffler's car rested on the speedway, Vogler was on a crash course collision towards the stationary 38 car. At the last minute, Jeff Vogler was able to swerve in time to miss Leffler on the track, which was a blessing for Jason Leffler, but a big mistake for Jeff Vogler.
Leffler, the 38 car.
34 car, hard impact with the inside of the wall on the backstretch there.
That's Jeff Fuller in the 34 car. Jeff Fuller, to avoid hitting him right in the door, he turns his car hard left. But unfortunately, he's not going to be able to spin it around. He's going to make some awfully hard contact with the inside wall. We're getting reports that Jeff Fuller was moving as you see them loading him in the ambulance. They will, I'm sure, take him to the infield care center to be checked out, and we will give you an update just as soon as we get one from NASCAR.
Jeff Vogler lost control of his car while avoiding the 38 machine, leading to him heading towards the inside wall. Like Atlanta in the 1980s, Kentucky Speedway's interior walls were well packed with dirt with no safer barrier to cushion the impact. Worse, Fuller's trajectory towards the inside wall was exacerbated thanks to the pavement lining part of the back straightaway, along with a small opening making the angle of the impact more devastating. Once the car hit the wall, the whole car seemingly shifted due to the G-force of the impact on the passenger side. Scarier, the car caught on fire as it came to rest, making the situation more dire than it already was. The field was stopped in turns 3 and 4 while medical personnel came to the aid of the potentially seriously injured driver. Minutes passed as fans and commentators could only watch to see if the Massachusetts driver was alive. Finally, after a few minutes, cameras caught the driver on a stretcher, moving his arm, showing to everyone that he was conscious. Turns out the driver did suffer from smoke inhalation, a broken wrist, and a broken pinky. Injuries that seem mild compared to how the wreck looked on the replays. It was later determined that the implosion of the car itself was mainly due to a faulty roll cage, showing how lucky Fuller was to survive the incident. Changes were eventually made to the track as the elimination of dirt track walls were slowly disappearing from the sport. The race continued and the night ended on a good note with the go-or-go-homer winning the event, shocking the world. However, many knew how close the race was from being won in the history books to a tragic misfortune, as when Fuller's car headed towards that opening in the wall, it became a staple in history as a moment in NASCAR where time froze. The term ARCA brakes has been tossed around in the racing community, mostly to joke on the inexperienced drivers or underfunded teams not slowing down when an accident happens. Although this is an insensitive joke that fans make about ARCA drivers to this day, it does hold some truth due to the inexperience that some drivers have at racing at that speed. And in our next story, a perfect example of speed and inexperience can lead to a scary situation. In the 2009 season for the then ARCA Remax and Menard series, the first race was met with a lot of anticipation thanks to it being held at the iconic Daytona International Speedway. Some noticeable drivers participating in the race were future three-time champion Joey Logano, ARCA legend Frank Kimmel, and even Ricky Carmichael. With all that talent, one might think that this race was fairly tamed. Well, it wasn't. In fact, the race was so chaotic that the first half of the 80-lap race saw three big ones that involved over 30 cars in the race. At this point, many were hoping the race would end smoothly throughout the second half, as almost every car was beaten and battered. With only 6 laps to go, the ARCA world realized that there was still one more accident waiting to happen, and it turned out to be the worst one yet.
Justin Lofton into the back of the 60. Patrick Shelton spins. Into the wall he goes. And now Kimmel spins around. Oh, and a big hit on Justin, or on the 60 of Patrick Shelton.
Patrick Shelton, a third-year driver in the ARCA series, was running against the leaders before contact was made between him and Justin Lofton. Shelton was immediately turned sideways with no chance of saving the car from hitting the outside wall. For a quick second, it looked to be only a 2-car spinout with little damage to both cars. That was until the number 23 car of Larry Hollenbach could be seen not letting up while driving into the direction of the already wounded number 60 car. Shelton's car was hit at full speed behind the driver's side compartment. The incident left both cars absolutely destroyed and both drivers unable to exit their race cars under their own power. For 15 minutes, fans and drivers had to wait patiently to see if both drivers were alright. Near the end of the red flag stoppage, Hollenbach was extracted out of his car, giving a thumbs up to the fans, showing that he was in good spirits. Shelton, however, was in much worse condition. Patrick Shelton was knocked out from the impact, making him unresponsive to personnel. The driver was eventually extracted out of his car too, but suffered a cracked vertebrae and a dislocated kneecap. Surprisingly, Patrick Shelton not only came back to the ARCA series that same season, but in fact never missed a single race in that 2009 season. Thanks to the second race being scheduled 2 months out from the Daytona opener, Shelton was able to fully recover from his injuries. Patrick Shelton stated that he didn't remember anything from the crash itself, and that his road to recovery only required enduring being laid up a lot and not being able to do much. To put a nice bow on this almost scary story, Patrick Shelton wound up winning the second race of the 2009 season, edging out Justin Lofton, the same driver who spun him out in the final laps of the Daytona ARCA race. A fairly good ending to what was considered to many as the worst example of ARCA brakes in the racing series. At this point in the series, we are all well aware of how dangerous it was to race in NASCAR in the first couple of decades. Cars were cheaply made, safety measures were basically non-existent, and the sport was just trying to get off the ground from being just a regional series. With that said, there have been many incidents that have left a lasting impression on the NASCAR world. Most of the time, they have come from the giants of the racetrack world. Daytona, Talladega, Indianapolis, mostly tracks that go past the 2-mile mark in length. However, one of the scariest accidents in the 50s came from one of NASCAR's oldest racetracks, and I'm surprised it's not talked about more often. This story involves the Lady in Black and the father of one of Dale Earnhardt's most memorable crew members that stepped foot on the NASCAR scene. Back in 1957, the race that everyone wanted to win in was the Southern 500, a crown jewel event to this very day and an endurance race back in its early days. Over 60 cars entered the race, with only 50 being able to qualify for the main show. One driver that was able to not only race his way into the show, but start in the second position was Bobby Myers, father of Danny "Chocolate" Myers. Bobby only ran a handful of races, but never had the opportunity like he did in the 1957 Southern 500. It helped that he was running a car that was made by Petty Enterprises, the Goliath of the sport, in the early days. If Bobby Myers ever had a shot to win a race, then this weekend was the one. Myers would receive the green flag starting in the middle of row 1 alongside Curtis Turner and Cotton Owens. In the first laps of the race, Myers' number 4 car was keeping up with the leaders. It looked to be a big day for the North Carolina native. At least it was, until lap number 27. While the drivers were racing up front, problems emerged from the Herb Thomas number 92 car. But it wasn't Herb that was driving the car, but instead Fonty Flock, a member of the legendary Flock family. The drivers suffered tire issues in the opening laps, resulting in the team going many laps down. At this point, Fonty was hoping to just stay out of trouble and finish the race with a respectable finish. Unfortunately, that same issue he had before popped up again, only this time he was not able to limp the car down pit road.
Fonty Flock and Thomas's car spins out at the end of the backstretch. He's broadside to the oncoming traffic, bearing down on him at 115 miles an hour. Look out! Bobby Myers and Paul Goldsmith slam into the stalled car. The cars are thrown 200 feet by the impact.
You can see where it went. It's just like an explosion, and there's no time to avoid hitting it.
In an instant, 3 functioning race cars turned into absolute rubble after contact was made with the stationary car of Flock. Myers and Goldsmith were battling for the 3rd spot when they were coming towards the car, so letting up wasn't an option for either driver. It appeared that Bobby Myers was trying to avoid Flock, but it was far too late. Bobby Myers' car would smash into the number 92 car, sending the number 4 Petty's Oldsmobile to tumble violently down the racetrack. Behind him, Paul Goodsmith wound up tumbling as well, but luckily for Goldsmith, his car landed back on its wheels. The other 2 cars were seen laying on their sides. Once help came over to assess the drivers involved, it was apparent that one driver did not survive. Bobby Myers unfortunately lost his life once the car impacted the 92 car. Myers had no chance of surviving the crash. Video of what remained of the Petty Enterprise car showed the true extent of where most of the carnage was located. The race eventually continued with Speedy Thomas winning the race, but sadly it was overshadowed by the events that unfolded in the early part of the race. 2 drivers were seriously injured, and another one lost their life. Bobby Myers was only 30 years old that fateful day in South Carolina. Like many, he was just trying to live his dream of being a race car driver. Bobby's son Chocolate Myers came into the same sport that took his dad's life years before to become the gas man for the legendary driver of Dale Earnhardt. Today, he is still involved in the sport by becoming a radio host on Sirius NASCAR channel. So, it's nice to see that the Myers name has stayed so long in the sport. But sadly, one was taken away in perhaps the most brutal incident in the early days of NASCAR racing. It just looks like any other race report sheet. The final results of the Pocono AC Sparks plugs in 1990. Upon initial inspection, nothing tends to pop out. That is until we glance at the bottom of the report. In the 40th and final position, we see a driver that did not start the event, which wasn't uncommon back then, as many small teams tend to have troubles before the race even began. But this driver wasn't just any up-and-coming driver or even a field filler. In fact, it was someone who was making their debut in the NASCAR Cup Series. If the name looks familiar, It is because Rich Vogler is known as one of the greatest USAC drivers in the series history. A driver with over 170 USAC featured wins, 134 national feature wins, 7 USAC championships, and even 5 starts in the Indianapolis 500. Rich Vogler, to put it lightly, was one of the best in USAC history, and if you don't believe me, he was one of the inaugural inductees in the USAC Hall of Fame, along with other legends such as Mario Andretti, AJ Foyt, and Parnelli Jones, just to name a few. And if even that wasn't enough, his final USAC championship came in 1989, the same year where Jeff Gordon won the Rookie of the Year in the same series. Vogler was a true legend, and many believe that his legacy would continue well into the 90s with no interruptions. Sadly, that all changed at a race at Salem Speedway in Indiana. On July 21st, 1990, Rich Vogler drove his White Lightning for the Hoffman Racing Team at the Salem Speedway in Indiana. Everything seemed to be going the norm for the Illinois legend, dominating the race, ticking down the laps in first, and on the verge of collecting yet another featured win. On lap 29, with little more than 1 lap to go, Vogler approached the lap driver as they prepared to overtake another competitor. Wayne Hammond, the lap driver, did not see the quickly closing Vogler, who was approaching at a fast rate of speed, and made a move just as Vogler attempted the same. And when 2 USAC cars make contact while going for the same real estate, well, destruction usually follows.
A problem coming off turn 4. It's your leader. It is your leader, Rich Vogler. A big crash coming off the 4th corner. I don't know if we have that on the replay. We have the security keeping people back. A vicious crash coming off the 4th corner as Vogler was coming down to take the white flag. He came off the corner and made vicious contact with the outside wall. Once again, security trying to keep everybody back away so they can tend to the driver involved.
Rich Vogler's car made contact with the right rear tire of Wayne Hammond, causing the car to vault into the turn 4 wall and fence. The impact was ferocious and only amplified when the cameras caught Rich Vogler's helmet rolling down the straightaway. A sickening sight to behold, as it meant that Rich Vogler received the impact fully without protection and suffered head injuries that killed him instantly. The race was immediately halted, and he was posthumously declared the winner. A sad moment for all watching the event, and a dark day in USAC history. So why are we talking about all this? Why are we talking about a driver that was known for his USAC career and not his NASCAR career? It's certainly a moment in racing where time froze, but not NASCAR, right? Well, going back to the original final results report at the beginning of this story, you'll notice that the date of this race is July 22nd of 1990. One day after Rich Vogler lost his life, he was slated to race in his first ever NASCAR event, which was going to be the AC Sparkplug 500 with US Racing. In respect to the USAC driver, the team decided not to have a replacement driver run the car, opting to not start the race instead, leaving it forever in the record book as a DNS for Rich Vogler in his first and only start in the NASCAR series. Something that I find so eerie to see, as the driver was not even alive during the start of this event, making it a moment in NASCAR that is frozen in time as a sad reminder of how close Rich Vogler was to starting his NASCAR career.
The entire racing community is saddened today. This is the 32nd position from which Rich Vogler was supposed to have started his first Winston Cup race this afternoon. The 5-time Winston Cup, the midget champion, USAC, was killed last night in a USAC sprint car race at Salem, Indiana. Rich Vogler would have been 40 years old this coming Thursday. Our thoughts and prayers are with Rich Vogler's family.